Welcome to the Whitmercast, a podcast by the John Whitmer Historical Association. We bring you essays, interviews, panel discussions, and broadcasts related to Mormon history and restoration studies. My name is Katherine Pollock, and I'm currently an independent scholar. I'll be your host for today's episode. Thank you for tuning in. We have a great episode lined up for you. We'll be talking to Rebecca Williamson. If you'd like to join JWJ or visit our entire backlog of episodes and JWJ journals, go to jwj.info. With that out of the way, let's get started. Today, I have the pleasure of being joined by Rebecca Williamson. Rebecca Williamson was raised in Bowen, Illinois, where she cherished many weekends with her grandparents, Lewis and Riley Fowler, near Nauvoo, Illinois. After graduating from Southeastern High School, she pursued her studies at Western Illinois University. For several years, she served in various positions at the United States Postal Service, including roles as a window clerk and mail carrier. She has always had a love for history that included many history conversations with her grandparents and Uncle Bill Leinberg. She purchased the Cambrai House in 2016 and joined the Nauvoo Historical Society, serving as past president and current secretary. She is currently the tourism director for the city of Nauvoo. Becca, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
How did you get involved with the Nauvoo Historical Society and Nauvoo history in general?
Well, I would say I've always been involved in Nauvoo history. My grandparents, Lois and Raleigh, absolutely loved history, and my uncle Bill Leyenberger was really involved in the Hancock County Historical Society and the Nauvoo Historical Society a bit. So when I was a kid and we were over at their house, we were talking Nauvoo history all the time. So I was kind of raised with it. And then in 2015, my grandmother passed away, and I purchased the Cambrai House, which is an Icarian home that my grandparents had. They bought the home initially in 1979 to preserve the history of the home, and so basically they kept it like a museum. I purchased that property in 2016 with the intention of preserving the history out there. And so I joined the Nauvoo Historical Society at that point, doing more research on the Icarians and who they were. And if you know Nauvoo history, you might have heard Icarians. But that was kind of why I joined the Historical Society, because I bought a historic home outside of Nauvoo. And then I showed up to a meeting and they said, "Hey, I think you should be on the board." And then all of a sudden I'm president, and it's kind of my baby now. I love the Historical Society. I love what we do in Nauvoo. And it's been fun. I like it.
That is a great story.
Yeah.
So most of our listeners are familiar with kind of, the 7-year Joseph Smith period of Nauvoo. Can you give us a little bit of overview of the different groups that have settled in the area?
Sure. This is one of my favorite things to talk about. The Nauvoo area was originally settled by Native Americans. The Native American village that was here was called Quashquema. There's some debate on like how many Native American settlers were in the area. Between 40 and 400 lodges were supposed to be here. In the 1820s, Captain James White came to Nauvoo. He purchased what had been the Indian trading post, and then opened up his home. Captain James White was a keelboater, so he took goods off the boats and moved them past the area of rapids that was on the Mississippi River around Nauvoo. So Captain James White was kind of like the first European settler, and he called this town Commerce that he started. And so this was run as Commerce for, well, they originally called it Venus on the Rapids. I skipped Venus. Venus on the Rapids. And then Captain White changed the name to Commerce because they were trying to make this more of a commercial hub and a commercial center. And then and Joseph Smith comes. And so Joseph Smith uh, renamed the town Nauvoo. So that kind of well documented the whole Latter-day Saint period. Um, and so then let's see, 7 years, the Joseph Smith and the Latter-day Saints were here in Nauvoo, and then they leave, and um, there's a group of French socialists who have Etienne Cabet and writes this manifesto novel, Voyage to Ickery, in France, and he convinces like 300,000 people to come and do his perfect utopian society in the United States. And so the French Revolution finishes, and they all decide that France is great. It's better now. So he only ended up with like 3,000 people that came over to the United States. Etienne Cabet had originally purchased property in Texas, but they were victims of a land swindle. And so they were in New Orleans when somebody says, hey, there's this property in Nauvoo, Illinois that's for sale. And that was all she wrote. They loaded up on the boats and they come to Nauvoo and they purchase a lot of the property from the Saints. It was a really a good fit because here's this huge communal society that's looking for property, and this big communal society is just left Nauvoo. So the Icarians purchased Temple Square, a lot of the property around Temple Square, and they reused a lot of the buildings. And the Icarians were also planning on rebuilding the temple and using that. Um, Unfortunately, while they were literally inside the building working on it, it was hit by a tornado. And luckily, no one was hurt, but that two more of the walls fell. And so then the temple was unusable at that point. But they did use the bricks. So the building blocks of the temple were reused all over Nauvoo. But most notably by the Icarians. They used Temple Square for like the center of their communal society, where they had a schoolhouse, they had 3 apartment complex buildings, they had a large dining hall, and businesses that were all around that Temple Square area, which is hard to picture today with the temple rebuilt. But the Icarians were here in Nauvoo for a period of 7 years. They kind of dissolved. There was like a, a split in leadership. Cabet took a group down to St. Louis, and then a group went on further west to Corning, Iowa. Um, so after that kind of disbanded, um, you still see there's a lot of French influence to Nauvoo with the Baxters are Icarians. They did Veillance, the beekeepers in Hamilton. Those are Icarians. There's a lot of Icarian names floating around. And then you get like a lot of German immigrants around late 1850s, 1860s. There's a big German population that comes into Nauvoo. And that's where we get the Krause family who owns Hotel Nauvoo, and um, and then we move into like the more modern period with the commerce of different businesses and that kind of stuff. So
Thank you. That was a great overview. So when I was an intern at the Joseph Historic Site back in the day, and so in 2017 and 2018, our our summer instructor, he did a little bit about the broader history of Nauvoo, and he listed some other connections. So I'm going to list some of those.
okay,
So, like you said, the Icarians built with the temple stone in different places. Um, Joseph Smith III studied French for the Icarians. The Presbyterians first met in the 70s hall. The minister from the Presbyterian congregation married Joseph Smith III and his first wife, Emmeline. And then, let's see, the current Presbyterian church was built with bricks from the home of John D. Lee.
that's
The first,
correct.
the first Methodist meeting in Nauvoo was held in the Nauvoo Temple. And then it said when the Methodist congregation had their 50th anniversary in 1996, they held a service at the temple site. So, and then Emma Smith and Louis Weideman were married in the home of the Methodist minister. Catholic masses were celebrated where the saints were here in the Mansion House in the 70s Hall. Joseph Smith Jr. allowed Catholics to do a baptism in the Nauvoo Temple and said Harley P. Pratt owned the building that became St. Patrick's, now Villa Marie, where the priests now live. And the last one here, oh, there's a couple more. A Latter-day Saint arson across the street became a Catholic school run by nuns at St. Mary's Academy. The Lutheran congregation met in what had become a Latter-day Saint store. Then Hotel Nauvoo began as a Latter-day Saint home, finished by German immigrants, then became the Hotel Oriental.
Yes, I will confirm all that is correct.
All right, he got it
Yes.
right.
Yes. It's interesting how much of our history overlaps and stuff. Like, um, the churches reusing buildings, and I think a lot of people think that those buildings just crumbled and were unused, but so many of them were used for long periods of time for multiple purposes. So
So, so the Nauvoo Historical Society it was started in the mid 20th century. What do we know about its founding?
um, from what I know, it started in the 1950s. It was um, right around the time that they were starting NRI and um, Nauvoo Restoration Incorporated. It was right around that point, and it was mainly tasked with starting the museum in the Rheinberger. So the Rheinberger Museum was the start of the state park. The Rheinberger family donated the property and the grounds to start Nauvoo State Park. And the original plans for the Nauvoo State Park, I saw those, and that the plan was to have it rebuild a lot of the Mormon buildings that would have stood in the state park. And the entire flats were supposed to be part of the Nauvoo State Park. And of course, that didn't quite happen that way. But the Historical Society was started around that point with the intent of preserving the entire history of the city of Nauvoo, and they opened the museum in the Rheinberger. So the Rheinbergers was built originally by the Wagner family, who were LDS, and then the Rheinberger family, who were German from Liechtenstein. They added onto the home and built a huge stone arch wine cellar underneath of it. So, yeah, that's basically the start of the Historical Society in the 1950s.
And then it's been going ever since, or has it had any
Yep,
breaks? Or
it's been going ever since.
okay.
Long standing history of being here in Nauvoo, and yeah, it's been active since the 1950s.
Now I know there's an event called Untold Nauvoo Stories, which is kind of a history presentation about the broader history of Nauvoo.
Yep.
How is the Nauvoo Historical Society um, related to that?
So we're kind of like a partner with that. Untold Stories is a separate nonprofit group. They run the annual history symposium in February, and it's a 3 day event with speakers that come and tell stories of Nauvoo history. And I've spoken at it a few times, and several of our members are involved on that board and speak at the event. It's so interesting, and it's built on telling little known stories of Nauvoo history. The one I told a few years ago was how my ancestors, the Van Tassels, inspired the Sleepy Hollow story. They were neighbors with Washington Irving, and so they inspired Sleepy Hollow, and then they moved to Nauvoo. So it was Sleepy Hollow to Nauvoo, but a lot of the stories are like that. They're just family history stories. Last year we had Dale Harris, who was a construction person here in Nauvoo, um, which sounds simple unless you're in Nauvoo, because he worked on rebuilding the foundation of the Joseph Smith home mansion. When they were doing all that construction, he was involved in that. So he not only could talk about that, but he could talk about how Nauvoo has changed over time, which buildings that he was involved in doing construction repair. Not every historical building is owned by the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in Nauvoo. Some of them are still privately owned. And Dell Harris has lived here over 70 years. And as a construction person, and worked on a lot of those homes. And he was absolutely fascinating to hear talk. And so that's what Untold Stories is. Different people in Nauvoo talking about little known Nauvoo stories that may not have been heard before.
You said that it was in February usually.
Yes, yes. It's usually the second week in February. This year it is on Valentine's Day. So Valentine loves history. They do live stream it, so you can watch it live streamed if you can't make it to February.
What are some recent events that the Nauvoo Historical Society has put on? When does it usually meet?
The board meets monthly, the membership meets quarterly. So our quarterly membership meetings, we always have a presentation, and it's always something interesting, some little Nauvoo history thing. We did the one in May, was mayor to mayor. So we had longtime Mayor John McCarty, who was mayor of Nauvoo for over 20 years, with Hugh Pierce, who had been the mayor of Nauvoo for 7 years in the early 70s. So they were both talking about their time as Nauvoo mayor. This last um, August member meeting was about we had the historic preservationist from the Latter-day Saint Church. He came and talked about modern preservation methods that they're using on the buildings here in Nauvoo. So yeah, our quarterly meetings are always a neat event where we learn about Nauvoo history. And then we also do various events. So we do Oktoberfest, where we celebrate our German heritage. So that's the night before Pumpkin Walk. This year will be October 25th. And we have a polka band and and German food. We have a member who moved to Nauvoo from Germany, and so he makes some authentic German food. That's a fun event. We also do French Heritage Days, and so it kind of celebrates that French Icarian heritage. Those are fundraisers for us. It's kind of a great time to get together and celebrate our heritage, fundraise for the two museums that we run here in town. So those are our big ones. And then of course we have the museums that are open from May through October.
So, and tell me more about these two museums. You said the Historical Society owned the Weld House Museum and the Rheinberger House Museum.
Yes. So the Weld House Museum is on Mulholland Street. It's 1380 Mulholland. It was owned, it was a doctor's office that Dr. John Weld used during the 1840s. So you are in an authentic doctor's office from the 1840s in Nauvoo. The Weld House is set up as a timeline of Nauvoo history. So you walk into the there's a sliced cutout tree that Captain White traded for the ground of Nauvoo from the Native Americans from. And it starts with that early pioneer Native American and natural history. It moves into Latter-day Saint history. And then we have the Icarian history in there and the modern merchants. So that Weld House Museum, like I said, is kind of like a history timeline. And then the Rheinberger Museum is in the state park. Again, that was the start of the state park. And that one is preserves like the history of the Rheinberger family. And then we have a lot of items in there that were donated by various people to preserve Nauvoo history. So we have a Civil War flag that was used at the Battle of Corinth. So and then we have some uniforms from World War I, World War II. Dr. Lillian Snyder, who was instrumental in preserving the the Icarian history. We have like her Girl Scout uniform down there, and it the Rheinberger is more like a home and set up as a home that preserves like history of people in Nauvoo. And then it's got a large stone arch wine cellar. The stone arch wine cellar is oh incredible. It's this huge wine cellar built out of stacked stone. At one point, there were over 40 of those in Nauvoo and over 70 wineries. Nauvoo had been a major wine growing region for a long time, and it grows wine and grapes and stuff. And so a lot of the winemaking history is there at the Rheinberger.
Do you have a favorite item or items that you're really excited about, or are you just excited about everything, or
Everything. There's so much stuff in there. I mean, I think that that Civil War flag is one of my favorites. To think that that flag was in the Civil War. I love that one. The Rheinberger has that a square grand piano that was part of the Icarians colony. Um, Anything in the Icarian room. I love the Icarian history. So absolutely fascinating. The Icarians were the longest running non-religious communal society in the United States. They were active up until 1899. So that Icarian history is just so fascinating. And so the Icarian room has like the newel post from the Icarian apartment houses that are no longer standing. And there's a little bits of Cambry history up in there too. So there's like a wooden shoe that was came from the Cambry house that's in there. So you know, Cambry, my property, and have that little bit over there is kind of fun too. So
does the Nauvoo Historical Society does it have an archive as well as the museums, or
yes.
yes?
um, I was explaining to you earlier, like we are working on being more of a research center. So we do have a lot of family history materials and Nauvoo history materials. Like we have all the cemetery sexton records and photographs, lots and lots of photographs and documents that relate to Nauvoo history. And so we had been focused for many years on the museums and keeping the museums open and going. And while that is still a focus, we're trying to transition to being better equipped for research purposes. We have the things, it's just a matter of organizing them. So like when the Nauvoo Independent newspaper closed, all that those items came to the Nauvoo Historical Society. So we have all the newspaper archives from 1890s to the 1970s and 80s when the newspaper closed. So what we're working on right now is trying to scan and digitize and organize those where it's a little bit easier to research. We definitely have the stuff. It's a matter of being able to put your hands on the stuff when somebody asks for it. That's kind of where we're at right now. But yes, we have things.
So is it not quite ready for researchers to come in, or what would you say?
Um, it is and it isn't. So you're definitely welcome to come and research, and we will help you as best we can. But I'm not always able to immediately lay hands on an item. So if you have time and you are really excited about Nauvoo history, you're welcome to come and help us sort.
So I heard that the Campery house is haunted. What can you tell me about that?
Yes. So when I purchased this historic home that was really more museum than home, I was trying to figure out what to do with it, and I initially decided to open it as a wedding venue. So I opened it as a wedding venue, and then we started to have things happen, and I realized it was haunted. And so, yes, it is haunted. We do ghost tours out there and allow people to come in and do paranormal investigations. And it's it's a fun way of being able to preserve the history of a home. Um, I get to go on podcasts all the time and talk about the Cambry family and the Cambry family history, and then my grandparents' history as well. My grandparents never lived at the Cambry house. They bought that home with the sole intention of preserving the history of the home. And so being able to keep that history alive and keep that history going, it has been really wonderful for me. It's something I'm just adds to it where I can come in and say, you know, Adolph and Hortense Cambry built this house, and maybe you can interact with them. So
So I saw that you published a little booklet called An Architectural Tour of Nauvoo.
I did, yes. My new job is the tourism director. I'm the tourism director for Nauvoo. And I had looked at Quincy, Illinois has an architecture his tour book. And I was talking to the tourism director over there. I'm like, well, how did you get that? Did you hire an architect or and she's like, oh no, we just drove around, found pretty houses and wrote about them. And I said, well, I can do that. And so that's what I did. I went around and compiled like a list of historic homes in Nauvoo that I felt were important to the history, and did some research on the structure of the home. You know, a lot of our Nauvoo history, we concentrate on the person and not the structure of the building. And so it was kind of a different way to research. Like when I have the churches all included in there, and when you talk about a church, you talk about the pastor and the congregation and stuff like that, and not as much is written about the structure of the building. It was really a fascinating thing to research and put together, and it just talks about a little bit about the people that built the homes and the buildings and why. And the architectural styles. The architectural styles really are influenced by the people who come. You know, the Cambry House, for example, Adolph Cambry spent some time in New Orleans, and so there's few little New Orleans features on my Cambry House, and you know, just seeing the different styles of architecture. And I think one of the fascinating parts is John Replinger. He was an inventor who never patented anything. He would have been really, really famous if he would have patented things. And he invented cement brick homes, and the cement block was like his invention, but he never patented it. And so to be able to talk about John Replinger and show the cement block homes that are here in Nauvoo that people might have just driven by and not realized that that little bit of history is kind of cool.
So I asked quite a few questions here. Is there anything that I didn't mention that I should have asked about?
I think that seems pretty cool. You can always follow the Nauvoo Historical Society online. So we have a Facebook page, and then I'm starting to do a little bit more of a YouTube. I've been trying to corral some of our older historical society members into talking more about Nauvoo history and putting that up on YouTube. And I've also been recording our member meetings, and so those are on YouTube as well. And the Facebook page, I throw little history things on there occasionally. And then you could also join the Nauvoo Historical Society. The membership is really low. It's like $25 per person or $30 for a couple. And we have a quarterly newsletter that comes out that I have an amazing researcher named Rita Souther, who worked in Washington, D.C. for the Daughters of the American Revolution as a genealogist. And then she worked for the Bureau of Indian Affairs as a genealogist. She retired and came to Nauvoo, and now we have her. And so she's been putting her researching skills to excellent use and writing an amazing newsletter for us that comes out quarterly that if you're a member, you can have.
Well, you've been very gracious with your time, Becca. Thank you for joining us today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I always love talking about Nauvoo history and talking about the Historical Society, and it's great to be able to highlight that.
Once again, we'd like to thank Rebecca Williamson for joining us today and lending her voice, her expertise in Navajo history. Her new booklet, An Architectural Tour of Nauvoo, can be found on Amazon. You can learn more about the Nauvoo Historical Society and its museums on their website, nauvoohistoricalsociety.com. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
We want to thank you for tuning in to the Whitmercast. John Whitmer Historical Association is an educational nonprofit institution. For more information, visit www.jwha.info, where you can meet our team and join the association, read past issues of the JWHA Journal, and get updates on upcoming conferences and events. Our theme music is I Love to Tell the Story, composed by Tom Moraine. This podcast is a production of John Whitmer Historical Association, all rights reserved.